Okay, so here we are with this panel again. We've connected up our hood latch release. We have three components that plug into the back, and we have this sensor that plugs into the back and then gets screwed in back behind there. See, it goes in the back there and gets screwed in. However, before you can get this all back together again, you got to put in this piece. This interior side panel component just snaps in. There's nothing holding it in. Right back here is a funky little piece that you have to sort of pull out the base for the center console and slide it in underneath and then push it upward to get it to go in, while maintaining the top pieces in their place, and then this just snaps in on the side there. It just pushes in with some snap connectors, and that's it. Once that's in, then you can start to finish off connecting this piece in. And this piece is connected with a screw underneath down here, and the rest of it just sort of snaps into place with clips. Okay, you can also see there's two additional screws to hold this side panel in. There's one up here, and then there's one way down at the back, way in the back. As you can see, it's sort of in the back over there. That one's got to be in as well. That holds this in place, and then you can pop up this bottom component. Okay, so here's the upper glove box and the passenger side air ventilation components. You can see from the back that it is primarily just a snap-in type of configuration. There's clips on the side on this side, clips on the side in there as well. These items have to line up into the behind this rubber edging. And the one thing that you do have to do is you have to put in the light bulb, which sort of looks like this, and it's just screws in and configures in before you actually attach everything in. And then we'll also probably mount this down with a couple, and we'll mount this down with a couple of screws as well, but we'll show you where those are later. Okay, so here's the center console, and you can see those two screws right down here, one down here, and one down over here. And then this plastic plate just slides in there and snaps down. These are mounted in with a couple of screws here, and then there's just a couple of clips up at the front here that plug in. So you plug in the clips, and then from the underside, from the top side, you mount down a couple of screws into here, and then there's a plate that covers it on the inside here. Okay, so this is the bottom of the center glove box console component. You can see right here is a port for cigarette lighter plugs, and then the two heating plugs for the seat heaters. So here's the seat heater component right here, and then there's this weird wire back here for the actual electrical plug that's inside of the glove box. This is the under console for the center console, and we mount it with two screws here, one screw here, one screw here. There's also a few wires hanging around that you got to make sure you have for the various bits and pieces that are going to be part of this, and this plugs in right down in here with this heavy duty plug. This is a lower vent cover. It just snaps in. There's the one for the other side, and you can see it's just sort of a plug snap-in configuration. And it basically just goes like this on the other side, so that will be the plug right there. Waiting for a new bolt for our steering wheel, and then I'm going to reinstall the airbag, which basically just slides in, clips in. It's color coded, and then there's two screws that go on the side. One goes in here and one goes in here, and these are security Torx, so you will need a security Torx sec like this item, and you can see they basically just have a little pin in the bottom there that allows you to allows for that, or a hole in the bottom rather, that allows for that pin that's in the bolt to actually go in. So these are the plugs for the driver's side airbag. You can see that they're color coded and they slide down in there, and these are these black clips that I mentioned you have to unclip before you can pull them out. And probably the easiest way to do that, if you're careful, is to take a sharp X-Acto knife and pry those up, and then you can release them pretty easily. That's for the driver's side airbag in the steering wheel. Okay, these two riser pieces right here, they're held in by two clips sort of roughly in this position here, and you just pound them in. You feed them in on this side first, and then you pound them in back here. They should fit really nice and snug. If you've put them in correctly, you can twist it a little bit to get it in perfect position. And make sure your hands are clean, otherwise you'll be cleaning them like I have to do, but I have to do that anyways, so we'll be using a cleaner on there to get those nice and pristinely cleaned up. Engine cowling back on, 2 nuts, 2 bolts, 10 mil. Okay, so we've reattached the windshield wipers. There's a couple of 14 mil bolts holding those wipers on. We also had a 10 mil bolt right there that we popped in, tightened down, and we're starting to put the this long, snaky gasket back in. Okay, so we've put the vents back in. We started putting the external venting back on, and we'll reattach the windshield wipers. We've also attached the washer fluid lines underneath, and we'll be putting in one bolt there, bolt up top there, another bolt right in here, and then there's clips that go in here as well, plastic clips that just pop out. This just slides underneath the windshield. We added back some intake components. We added this piece on with a clamp that tightens up here with a flathead screwdriver. We added this 10 mil bolt back in to hold it in place, and we also tightened up this thing and attached it back in. So that completes our air handling. So in order to get to those heater lines down behind here, we actually had to take this throttle body on the air intake off. So we've replaced the throttle body on the air intake. There's a gasket that goes in between these two, and we've clamped that down, and we're ready to continue to hook up the rest of the pieces. Okay, so we have connected up the coolant lines that go into the inside of the car into the heater core. So there's one there. It's got a clip that you have to put on, and it just slides back on. These are pretty difficult to get back on. You might consider putting a little oil on it to make it go a little bit easier. And the other one is over on this side down there. Alright, so in mounting the clock, you can see we've got 2 screws that mount the clock in. I also added a screw down here. I don't know whether there was one missing or it wasn't installed or what the deal is, but there wasn't one there, so I added another one in here as well just to tighten things up and keep the rattles down. Now you can see that this is ready to go with the bottom piece. It's going to slide in right under here. We're just going to snap it in place. Okay, so we're going to start reinstalling the clock here. You can see we've already plugged in the electrical at the bottom here. This is a little bit difficult to get in. It does fit in. It's quite snug once it does fit into its right position, and it can be a little bit difficult to get it in, especially with this electrical cable in here. This is the top components right here. So this is the top of the clock, and this is the bottom part of the clock. As you can see, there's nothing really holding this thing in other than these clips. So this one's going to slide in. We're going to sort of slide it in like this to the clock, and then this piece here snaps in at the bottom underneath. Now the trick with this one to get it in and out is to pry it up. Again, use it right underneath the edge here, and you got to do this using a non-mar tool for internal components for the cars. Again, you can pick those up at any at like Harbor Freight or someplace like that for about $10 for a set, and they're just non-mar interior tools for removing panels and stuff like that. So when we went to do the radio, we had to take apart the clock, and we put the new screw in the top here, 2 screws to hold in the clock, put the piece back on the housing around the clock, and then we added four screws in here. There's 2 screws up top, and there will be 2 screws that go in down below here, one there and one over on the other side that'll hold this in place. The thing is, when you're moving the shift, you'll have to move the shift to get into place, but if you're, if you dismantle anything, you can't move it. There's a release switch right here that can be used to actually move it back into place. Make sure your wheels are chalked if you're and blocked if you're going to actually be on a hill or anything like that. We're not. We're on a flat surface here. It's actually grades to underneath the car, so we're okay. But you'll need to be able to move this shift back and forth to get the radio in and out. Okay, the radio's back in. So you can see I dismantled the clock again, or the housing around the clock, so I could get the actual radio back in and reinstall the bolt at the top that holds it in place. There is 5 or 6 different plugs at the back that have to go in. One of them is dangling on the side. The other 4 are implanted in the back. And then there's the antenna plug as well. So those are the 6 plugs that have to go in. Make sure you have these other plugs dangling out. Anything left over there, because they will need to go in at some point. There's one over there. And then there's also one back up in here that we'll have to use for something else. Just make sure those are free and clear, and these ones over here are free and clear as well. Okay, there's 2 additional components we need to plug in. One is this little clip that goes into the back of this sensor, and the other one is this one of these brown clips that goes into the back of the antenna cord, I believe. Yeah, it's the antenna cord. So it needs a bit of power on the back of the antenna cord right back in there. So make sure those are in place as well. Okay, so this is one of the center console air ducts, and it sort of just goes in like this, and you can see that there's a bit of a screw hole on that side, and that fits into that screw hole right down there. And it's just a sort of a clip configuration, so these things just sort of slide in and pop in, and you just got to make sure that everything is lined up correctly, and then it just sort of pops right back in like so. Voila. That's all. So it just took a little push and it's already in, and then this sets up for the other components that have to come in, and then we'll put a screw right in there. Okay, so there's the blower back in, and you can see that there's a bunch of screws that attach underneath if you're taking it apart. These clips hold it in place as well if you're trying to clean it out. It's going to be a bit of a difficult thing to get it in and out. We found that by separating the 2 pieces, it was a little bit easier to get it back in after you've got everything else back in. But I'd recommend that you put this in as an entire single unit once you've sort of connected in the HVAC box over on this side. It just makes it a whole lot easier if you can do it in, just because of all the different things that you have to work around to get it in. There's a clip up here. There's a post back behind here. There's it has to connect up to the top in here, and then these screws have to be in place. So there's one screw here, and there's one screw way at the back up in the top there, and there's a third one down here that we haven't yet put in. The motor itself just pops in and out with 3 screws, and this plate goes also underneath those screws, and it's plugged in with this electrical component right here. The actuator servo is plugged in at the side right in here, and it's just a clip that pulls it out as well. And then once this is all done, then you can put back in this ECU. Okay, so these 2 gray pieces just snap together like this, and now we're ready to put the steering wheel back on. We got this lined up to where it should be again, and the gray plug goes on this side over here. And these will pop through and get ready for the airbag. Okay, also on this windshield wiper control unit, I want to point out that there's a plug that goes in the back here. It comes over from the other side and strings in and plugs in the back here. And then when you're putting these components on, the bottom pieces that cover the signaling switch and the windshield wiper switch, that gray plug also plugs in. Okay, so here we've got the controllers for the wipers and washers in the signaling. Those just slide straight in like this. There's some pins at the back they got to go into, but essentially the unit just slides right in this way, and this one just slides right in this way. That snaps in and snaps out. The other piece is this piece right here. You line it up at the right. Make sure you got it lined up to the right indicator, and then it just slides and pushes right in. It also pops out the same way. Okay, so we're having a bit of trouble getting the instrument cluster to go back in, and I removed this bottom black plate that was actually on the bottom here just to get a little bit better access. So when the instruments cluster is sitting in the right place, you will actually see those pegs. You see this black peg right up here that will actually go into place, and there's another one over on the other side over there as well. And these are the bolts that actually go into that to hold it in place. So if it is seated correctly, not only will those line up, but these additional points right here will also line up for the other screws. So that's how you get that thing in. Okay, so here's the back of the instrument cluster, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 connections that are made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 connections. So we'll go into the back of the instrument cluster, and then that'll be held on with 2 bolts and 2 screws, right? So there will be one here, one here, one down here, and one over here as well. 2 screws, 2 bolts, and that'll hold the cluster in place. Okay, one last thing I got to do before I put in the upper instrument cluster is to make sure that the ignition is plugged in the back here.